So now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker for today, Representative Jamie Raskin. Congressman Jamie Raskin proudly represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. The district includes most of Montgomery County and a small part of Prince George's County. Congressman Raskin was sworn into his 4th term at the start of the 118th Congress on January 6, 2023. That day should be in infamy. We remember that date. Representative Raskin was chosen by the Democratic caucus to be the ranking member of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability in the 118th Congress. This is his 4th term serving on this Oversight Committee. It'll be a long Previously, Representative Raskin served 3 terms on the House Judiciary Committee and the Committee on House Administration. He served 2 terms on the Rules Committee and the Coronavirus Select Subcommittee, and during the 117th Congress, he served as chair of the Oversight Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties and chair of the Rules Subcommittee on Expedited Procedure. So when faculty complain about the number of committees they serve on, remember this. Representative Raskin was the lead impeachment manager in the 2nd impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. And he served on the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Prior to his time in Congress, Raskin was a 3-term state senator in Maryland, where he also served as the Senate Majority Whip. He earned a reputation for building coalitions in Annapolis to deliver a series of landmark legislative accomplishments, including marriage equality, abolition of the death penalty, passage of the first benefit corporation law in America, and the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. He was also a professor of constitutional law at American University in Washington for more than 25 years. He has authored several books, including the Washington Post bestseller, Overruling Democracy, The Supreme Court versus the American People, and the highly acclaimed We the Students, Supreme Court Cases for and About America's Students. And finally, this latest book on the New York Times #1 bestseller, Unthinkable: Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy. So Congressman Raskin is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School and is a former editor of the Harvard Law Review. And I'm so grateful to the Convocation Planning Committee who recommended that we ask Congressman Raskin to be our guest speaker. So without further introduction, please welcome Representative Jamie Raskin.
Well, thank you, Dean Postmas, and to you, Dean Postmas, and distinguished faculty members, to the moms and dads out there, the grandparents, the uncles and aunts, and cousins and friends and siblings, to the 2023 graduating class of the University of Maryland School of Social Work, and to the Convocation Committee that invited me especially. It's an honor to address one of the nation's great schools of social work. You have an illustrious and storied past here, and every time I hear your name, it makes me proud of our state. Graduates, you enter an extraordinary profession. It has been central to the development of the major civilizing movements and social reforms of the last century in our country. And the history of social work has been profoundly intertwined with the history of feminism and women's political participation in our country. Our first female cabinet member, the great Frances Perkins, who served in President Franklin D. Roosevelt's cabinet, was a social worker. She played an instrumental role in the creation of Social Security and the passage of the federal minimum wage law, and she placed the ethic of social solidarity and mutual support at the center of the New Deal. The first woman ever elected to Congress, Jeanette Rankin from Montana, in 1916, was a social worker and a Republican. She was a passionate campaigner for women's suffrage, and after being elected to Congress from a state that enfranchised women early, she fought for the 19th Amendment for all women to get the right to vote, and that was ratified 4 years after she went into the House. She was a crusader for social reform, for voting rights and election reform, and a passionate anti-war activist who voted against U.S. participation in the First World War. Barbara Mikulski, the first woman ever elected to the United States Senate in Maryland, a Democrat and the longest-serving senator in our state's history, was and still is a committed social worker, and she, of course, went to this great school. And Senator Mikulski talks about it all the time as a formative influence in both her professional life and her political life. And for her, public office, she said, was just social work with power. And she never abandoned the sense of social mission and public purpose that she learned right here with this amazing faculty. So I know that you launch your careers with a spirit of great pride in the past and deep affection for this remarkable institution. But I also don't need to tell you that we're sending you off to do nearly impossible work under conditions of sharp political polarization and dramatic economic inequality, and that you will almost certainly be underpaid for your indispensable and excellent and intricate service to our communities. And yet I cannot think of anyone in America in a better position to help our society and shape a positive American future than the members of your graduating class. And because I am allotted just 10 minutes here and have foolishly already used 3 of them telling you things you already know, I want to give you 7 reasons before I leave you for you to be feeling tremendous optimism about your work and hope for the American future. So it's 7 reasons in 7 minutes, 1 reason for hope enclosed in each remaining minute I have. And the first reason I bring you is from my own political career. And when I first got into politics, I ran for the Maryland State Senate against a 32-year incumbent who was president pro tem of the Senate and the boss of our local political machine in Montgomery County. And when I announced, the Montgomery Journal, our local paper, quoted a pundit who said, "Raskin's chances of victory are considered impossible." And 9 months later, we got 67% of the vote, and the Washington Post had an article quoting a pundit who said, "Raskin's victory was inevitable." So we went from impossible to inevitable in 9 months, because the pundits are never wrong. But I like to tell young people that in politics, nothing is impossible and nothing is inevitable, but it's only just possible through education and organizing and mobilizing people for change. And anything that seems inevitable was once considered impossible. So you and your careers, by your creativity in your college, your compassion, and your education will regularly make the impossible inevitable in the lives of other citizens and other families. And that's the first reason I want you to be optimistic today. And the second also comes from that same campaign of mine back in 2006. And when I did my kickoff speech in sub-freezing weather in January, I laid out all the impossible things that I wanted to do in Annapolis. And Dean Postmus mentioned some of them, like passing marriage equality and abolishing the death penalty and banning military-style assault weapons in our state, and adopting a national popular vote and enacting medical marijuana for sick people. And after I gave my speech, a woman came up to me and she said, Jamie, great speech. I loved your speech. But one thing she said, take out everything you've got in that speech about gay marriage, because it's not going to happen, it's never going to happen, and it makes you sound like you're really extreme, like you're not in the political center. And I had to swallow hard because I didn't have that many attendees with me that day when I kicked off, and I didn't want to offend her. But my 3 kids were right there watching, and I remember so much my 11-year-old son Tommy being there and looking right at me to see how I was going to respond. And so I said, thank you very much for telling me that, because it makes me realize that it's not my ambition to be in the political center. It's my ambition to be in the moral center. And that's why I call myself a progressive. The heart of that word is progress, and we can make progress towards morality. Our job in politics is to find the moral center the best that we can and bring the political center to us. And the reason I'm telling you that story is because Maryland ended up doing all those things, not because of me, but because of everybody who was in office, doing all those things that inspired me to run for office in the first place. We made the impossible inevitable by operating from the moral center, not the political center. And you too can do that every single day in your work. I have seen politics, and I have seen government, and I've seen public policy, and I have seen social administration work here in the state of Maryland, and you are the next generation that's going to make it work. The third reason I offer you comes from a 2-minute conversation that I had with Paul Rusesabagina, who is the manager of the Hotel des Mille Collines in Rwanda, and the subject of the movie Hotel Rwanda, about the Hutu genocide against the Tutsi minority in Rwanda back in 1994. And when the Hutu military unleashed a brutal campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Tutsis, Mr. Rusesabagina, who is Hutu, allowed more than 1,000 Tutsi refugees to secretly take shelter in his hotel, saving their lives. And when I saw him speak about it more than a decade later, I had the chance to ask him a question. And I asked him this simple question. I said, you risked your life and everything you had to save other people's lives. What made you so different from the people who were unwilling to act? And he gave me this most amazing answer. He said, a lot of people walk around with guilt and shame about something they may have done in the past, and that makes them feel that they cannot act to do good in the present. It paralyzes them. But I realized, although I had done some things I was not proud of in my life, that I could still act to help a lot of other people now. You do not have to be perfect to do good in the world. And so that's a reason for great hope, which you can carry with you in the world. You do not have to be perfect to do good and to be good. My friend Kate Bennis tells me that this will be key to your success as a social worker. You may have been in bad trouble, like Malcolm X was before he went to prison, but you can make good trouble later on, as my late colleague and friend John Lewis called it. You can always go from bad trouble to good trouble in your life. My fourth reason for hope is that most of the common negative messages we receive about human nature are just propaganda and disinformation. And the vast majority of human beings on earth do good the vast majority of the time. And I can't prove this to you in 1 minute, but there's a great book that I recommend to you by Rutger Bregman called Humankind, which can prove it to you. And by the way, this would make a great graduation gift for anybody still trying to find one. It's called Humankind. But in the book, Bregman debunks almost all of the key negative messages we carry around in our heads about the depravity of our species. You know, William Golding won a Nobel Prize in Literature because of his novel Lord of the Flies, which has sold tens of millions of copies and which we all read and were traumatized by in middle school. But as Bregman explains it, the Lord of the Flies is completely demolished as a thesis about human nature by the evidence of a real-world shipwreck of Australian schoolboys in 1965 who found themselves stranded on a desert island, and they created a peaceful, functioning, democratic community with fairness and rules and absolute decency. And the boys formed bonds of lifelong friendship and became men of real character and conscience. Meantime, the author of The Lord of the Flies, William Golding, was a depressed misanthrope who as a teacher once divided his students up into gangs and urged them to fight one another. I've always understood the Nazis, Golding once said in an interview, because I am of that sort by nature. The Lord of the Flies is not a reflection in the mirror of human nature, but a reflection in the mirror of its author. Bregman similarly demolishes the other major cultural proofs of human depravity we carry around in our minds, like the Milgram experiments undertaken in the early 1960s at Yale by a social psychology professor who purported to show that people were willing to administer painful shocks to experimental subjects if they were told to do that by someone in authority. Well, Bregman shows the totally dubious methodology of the study, and he debunks all of it as something verging on a fraud. The point is that so much of what we've internalized about the alleged evil of our own species is just wrong and false. The evidence is that while undoubtedly there have been a lot of fanatical and pathological leaders who come to power, Vladimir Putin is one who comes to mind from abroad, most people end up rejecting these leaders as tyrants and monsters. And your job is to help translate the ordinary moral sentiments and intuitions of the vast majority of the people into effective public action, reform, and change. My fifth reason for you is that whenever things look grim, if you feel surrounded one day by corruption and insurrection and inequality and indifference, remember that we stand on the shoulders of giants who overcame far greater odds than we face even today. Frederick Douglass was born enslaved, not even an hour away from here, at the Wye River plantation on the eastern shore. He escaped from the violence and oppression of slavery to become America's leading abolitionist and freedom fighter and a major national leader through Civil War and the Reconstruction. Harriet Tubman was also born into slavery in Maryland and became a leading abolitionist and freedom fighter who rescued and liberated at least 70 enslaved people on the eastern shore. And Frederick Douglass said, if there is no struggle, there's no progress. The struggle may be moral or physical or moral and physical, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. A message to you from a fellow Marylander in the 19th century. And if Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman can conquer slavery with the Supreme Court against them and the U.S. Senate against them and the entire scientific establishment against them, we can conquer climate change in our time with the entire scientific establishment on our side. We can make that happen. And it might not feel like it sometimes, but you can look to another great hero of the American Revolution, Tom Paine, who said, "These are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country, but everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory." A message to you from the 18th century from Tom Paine. So, my sixth reason is this. So many people belonging to the new generations of Americans, generations millennial and Y and Z, and I can't keep them all straight because I'm sinking deep into middle age here, but all of the young people that I know are way beyond the racism, the sexism, the homophobia, the immigrant bashing. They're also a little bit beyond grammar too, but that's a different problem. But they have succeeded beyond the false idols of the past. The young are committed to addressing the climate crisis and overcoming racism, and they are serious about defending freedom and expanding equality in our country. Our future is a pro-democracy, pro-freedom, pro-human rights future, and you can see it in the young people of America. And there's a reason that reactionary forces in America are trying to shut down college student voting and to disenfranchise the young population. But it will be impossible to do that. You cannot disenfranchise entire generations. The real threat to their empowerment is the crisis in mental and emotional health. And so, if we can keep their spirits up, if we can safeguard their health, and teach them how to organize, then democracy will prevail in this new century. And finally, my seventh and final reason for you comes from my dad, Marcus Raskin, who was a political philosopher. And he used to say to the kids in my family, when everything looks hopeless, you are the hope. You are the hope. And yeah, I know that this is a lot of pressure and even guilt to impose on you on your graduation day. But when I look out at this magnificent and startlingly young class of 2023 of graduating students, what just happened there? All I can see in your faces is hope, great hope for our future. And in our future. You are the hope indeed, and you will be the hope for the countless people you come to serve over the course of your career. So there are my 7 reasons for hope for you. I could actually give you hundreds more, but like all commencement speakers, I've run out of time, and the rest is up to you. So Godspeed, and may fortune love you.
Congressman Raskin, we are so privileged that you took time out of your busy schedule to be here. We have a plaque that gives our appreciation for your words of wisdom to the University of Maryland School of Social Work graduating class of 2023.
Thank you so much.
And of course, you have to have University of Maryland bling.
No, well,
Enjoy. Unfortunately, Congressman Raskin has to leave because, he has this thing called the debt ceiling he has to deal with. I don't know. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.